It's just a watch. Mom. That's what my son said as he crossed his arms in my kitchen, his voice flat, almost bored. But it wasn't just a watch. It was the Rolex my late husband, Jack, wore every single day of our 43 years together. The watch he wound each morning while his coffee brewed, the one he pressed into my palm the night before his heart gave out. And now Ryan, my only son, had pawned it off for vacation money, as if his father's life could be traded for airline tickets and cocktails on a beach. My name is Eleanor Whitaker. I'm 69 years old, a widow. And until that moment, I believed grief was the deepest pain I'd ever know. I was wrong. Betrayal has its own taste, sharp, metallic, and permanent. That was the day my family broke something I can never get back. The coffee mug slipped from my fingers and cracked against the sink, a thin chip breaking away like a piece of the morning. I stared at the jagged rim, at the faint brown ring Jack never quite scrubbed out no matter how many times I teased him. 8 months gone, and I still washed his cup every day, the way he used to rinse it while the percolator sputtered. Rituals are the scaffolding you lean on when the house inside you has fallen down. Ryan didn't flinch at the sound. He leaned against my counter with that impatient tilt he's had since high school, arms crossed over his chest like he was bracing for turbulence. Brittany stood beside him in a perfect athleisure set, thumbs flicking across her phone as if my kitchen were just another airport lounge. They smelled like expensive detergent and new leather. "We sold Dad's old Rolex," Ryan said, as if he were announcing we'd run out of paper towels. "We're putting it toward Maldives." Flights spiked. I set the mug down gently, because the next thing I touched I might throw. "You did what?" "Mom, it's just a watch." He said it like he was soothing me, like I was a toddler mid-tantrum. Brittany finally looked up, lips pressed into a sympathetic pout. "You're clinging to the past. Jack wouldn't want that." She said my husband's name like a prop, something you hold up for effect and put away when you're finished. The words emptied the room of oxygen. I could see Jack's hands again, square, competent, scarred from years on boats, cupping that watch every morning. The small click as he wound it. The way he'd glance at me over the face, a private smile that said, "We're on time. We're okay." That watch traveled through 43 winters with us, through birth and mortgage and chemo scares that turned out to be benign, through his last night when he pressed my knuckles and whispered, "Keep moving." "It wasn't yours to sell," I said, hearing how even my voice had to fight to stay standing. "It was your father's." "He left it to me." Ryan shrugged. "There's a difference between sentiment and hoarding. We needed the money. We'll pay you back. For plane tickets and drinks served in coconuts. For bungalows with glass floors where you can watch fish while you forget the people who taught you to swim." I felt something old and iron-hard rise inside me, the same thing that lifted me through parent-teacher conferences and midnight fevers and the year he tried cigarettes behind the gym. "Where?" I asked. "Did you sell it?" He checked the sleek black face of his smartwatch, new, glossy, soulless. "Casco Bay Pawn and Timepieces. Guy gave me $800. Said it was generous for something that old." Brittany's gaze slid over my sweater, the unflattering kitchen light, the chipped mug. "You should think about therapy, Nora. Grief can get sticky at your age." My phone rang. Ryan rolled his eyes. "We have to go. Brittany's got a spray tan appointment." I let it ring once more, stubbornness a reflex that had kept me married and sane. Then I answered, my voice catching. "Hello? Mrs. Whitaker?" A man's voice, careful, courteous. This is Luis Alvarez from Casco Bay Pawn and Timepieces. I'm calling about a watch that came in today. Ryan's posture shifted, the smallest flinch. Brittany's chin tilted, listening without looking like she was. Yes, I said. I wanted you to know it's already been sold. Luis continued. But while we were logging it, I found something unusual. There's a micro engraving under the lug. You'd need a loop to see it. It reads, "For Nora, keep moving." For a second, I couldn't speak. The kitchen fell away and all I could hear was the loop of Jack's voice in my memory. The soft humor when he'd nudge me out the door. The stubborn tenderness when life tried to pin me to the couch. I also found a folded scrap tucked under the NATO strap. Luis said. It looked deliberate. I didn't send it out with the watch, just in case. It reads, PHL 431 SW. Mean anything to you? I wrote it down on the back of an old grocery list. My hand, steadier than my breath, PHL 431 SUEDBU. Summy 914. The letters and numbers sat on the page like a locked door I'd walked past for years. SW. Could have been anything. Somebody's initials. A street. The kind of breadcrumb you only recognize when you need it most. The room sharpened into angles, a sense I hadn't felt since Jack's last night. That quiet certainty he gave me when he pressed the watch into my palm. You can do hard things. Nora, you always have. Thank you, I said. Thank you for calling. I figured it might matter, Luis replied. His voice softened. My dad served with a man named Jack Whitaker on a cutter off Provincetown. He used to talk about him, about integrity. Sounded like your husband. When I hung up, the house felt glaringly bright. Ryan tried for casual. Pawn guys say all kinds of stuff to stir drama. You know how it is. I looked at my son, the jaw I used to kiss when he laughed so hard in the bath he hiccuped. The eyes that learned to look away when responsibility got heavy, and I realized something worse than grief had moved in. Not just loss, disrespect. The quiet rot that spreads when someone decides your love is leverage. Get out, I said, steady, almost kind. Both of you. Brittany scoffed, but Ryan tugged her sleeve. Mom, later, I said. Or maybe not. I need time. The door closed behind them, the latch clicking like a period at the end of a long, unnecessary sentence. I stood at the sink and picked up Jack's chipped mug. The edge was sharp but familiar against my thumb. On the counter, the ink from the grocery list bled a little where a drop of water had landed. PHL 431 SW 0914. The code stared back. Patient. I didn't know what those characters meant yet. I only knew the message beneath them. For Nora. Keep moving. A stranger had already walked out of a shop wearing the last thing that held Jack's warmth. But the thing that mattered hadn't been sold. It had been planted, carefully, stubbornly, by a man who knew me better than anyone alive. I dried my hands, folded the paper, and slipped it into my pocket like a compass. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The drive out to Cape Elizabeth felt longer than it was, every mile along the coast pressing down on my chest. By the time I pulled into the gravel lot at Portland Head Light, the sky was bleeding into a deep red, the kind of sunset Jack always stopped to photograph, insisting the world looked better through a little patience. The wind whipped off the Atlantic, cold and biting, and I clutched my coat tighter as I walked toward the visitor center. I already knew what I was looking for. PHL 431. The code on the scrap Luis Alvarez had pulled from Jack's watch hadn't left my mind for a second. And there it was, a row of old rental lockers tucked near the restrooms, numbers stenciled in fading paint. My heart pounded so hard I almost missed it. 431. The The key turned smoother than it should have for something left behind months, maybe years ago. Inside was a manila envelope with a single item, a slim brass key stamped Seaport Credit Union and a USB drive taped to the flap. My knees threatened to give way. This wasn't a coincidence. Jack had left this trail deliberately. I waited until I was home to plug the drive into my laptop. The screen flickered, and then his face filled it, tired, thinner than I remembered, but still my Jack. His voice trembled, but his words were steady. "Nora, if you're seeing this, it means Ryan has crossed a line. I prayed it wouldn't come to this, but I couldn't leave you unprotected. I created a trust, one he can't touch." I pressed a hand over my mouth, my breath breaking. Jack leaned closer to the camera. "Ryan is capable of things you don't want to believe. He'll forge signatures. He'll try to get power of attorney. If the Rolex ever leaves you, Nora, it means the storm has arrived, and you'll need to follow the trail." Hearing my name in his voice undid me. Tears blurred the screen. It was as if he were sitting across from me at the kitchen table, warning me, guiding me, even from the grave. Love and grief tangled so tightly I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. My own son had sold the watch. Jack had seen it coming. The betrayal stung deeper than death. The next morning, I carried the brass key to Seaport Credit Union, a modest brick building I'd passed 100 times without noticing. The teller barely blinked when I handed over the key. She led me down to a quiet vault lined with metal doors. My pulse echoed in the silence as she left me alone with Box 712. Inside was a thick binder stamped Salt Wind Trust. The first page listed assets, 3 rental properties in South Portland, a life insurance policy naming me as sole beneficiary, and something called an ethical will. My fingers trembled as I turned each page, absorbing the life Jack had built in secret. At the bottom of the box lay a sealed envelope. I tore it open and unfolded the contents, a private investigator's report. Subject, Ryan Whitaker. Findings, significant gambling debts, multiple payday loans, creation of shell company, Harbor and Hearth LLC, attempts to forge power of attorney documents to leverage mother's home equity, preliminary inquiries into elder care facilities, intent appears to be forced placement of subject's mother. The words blurred. My son, my only son. And then the second sheet, an email printout from Brittany to a nursing facility. My mother-in-law is confused. How fast can we place her under care? The vault swayed. I sat down hard on the bench, the metal biting through my coat. Losing Jack had gutted me. But this felt like losing Ryan all over again, except this time it was by choice, his choice. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. Then anger surged up, hot and clean, burning through the fog of despair. Jack had seen the storm and built a wall of steel and paper to shield me. He had trusted me to use it. I closed the box, slid the key back across the counter, and walked out into the winter light. My legs still shook, but each step was steadier than the last. Whatever Ryan and Brittany thought they were building, Jack had already laid the foundation of my defense, and I would not let it crumble. Asha Rao's office was wedged above a seafood shack near the harbor, the smell of salt and fried clams lingering even inside. Stacks of case files crowded her desk, law books bristling with yellow tabs. I sat across from her, my hands trembling as I slid the binder, the investigator's report, and Brittany's printed email across the table. She scanned quickly, her expression tightening with each page. Then she looked up, eyes sharp behind her glasses. "Nora, this isn't just family drama. This is fraud and elder abuse." The words hit harder than I expected. Fraud, elder abuse, my son's name inked across both. Asha pulled her keyboard closer. We'll petition to freeze every account that shows Ryan's signature. We'll file to block any guardianship motion before it reaches a judge, and we'll be ready when they try to force your hand. As she typed, my phone buzzed. Luis Alvarez. I excused myself and answered. His voice was low, almost conspiratorial. The man who bought the Rolex came back. He didn't give his name, but he left an envelope for you. I opened it right there in the office. Inside was a simple business card. Ben Carr, retired CGIS, Coast Guard Investigative Service. On the back, in slanted ink, Jack trusted me. Call when you're ready. I held the card like it might burn me. Even from the grave, Jack had people waiting in the wings. Plans inside of plans. It sent a shiver down my spine and warmed me in the same breath. He had seen the storm coming, and he had not left me alone in it. The rain came in sheets that afternoon, hammering the windows as Ryan arrived with his lawyer in tow. Brittany followed, heels clicking across my hardwood, eyes darting over the papers on my desk as though cataloging what might be used against me. Ryan set down a folder, sliding it toward me like a dealer pushing chips across a table. Petition for guardianship, he said, voice clipped. It's for your own good. Mom, you're not managing things anymore. I steadied my breath. For my good or for your debts? Brittany's lips curved, the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. Before I could say more, the landline rang. It was the HOA treasurer. Nora, we just got a withdrawal request from your email. The entire roof repair fund, the IP trace came back. Las Vegas! My stomach dropped. Ryan's lawyer shifted uneasily. Ryan crossed his arms tighter, but his silence was louder than denial. Later, after they left, Mrs. Connors from across the street stopped by with a casserole she pretended was casual. She hesitated at the door. Brittany mentioned at church you've been forgetful. Everyone's worried. The casserole weighed like a stone in my hands. They weren't just trying to strip my accounts. They were poisoning the well of my community, laying the groundwork for a court to believe I couldn't stand on my own. That night, I checked the Ring doorbell footage. The clip was clear as daylight, Ryan leaning in close to Brittany on my porch. Once we're back from Maldives, she'll be in a nursing home. Papers will be ready. I clutched the USB drive with Jack's voice still locked inside it. The fury rose hot, not chaotic but focused, steady. Jack, I whispered into the empty kitchen, they think I'm weak. They have no idea who you prepared me to be. The fog hung thick over the Portland docks, swallowing the masts and horns of early boats. I spotted him through the mist. Ben Carr, standing steady in a faded Coast Guard jacket, hands tucked deep in his pockets. His eyes carried the weight of men who had seen storms no map could mark. Without a word, he reached into his coat and placed Jack's Rolex in my palm. My throat tightened. The weight was familiar, but heavier now, as if it carried secrets I wasn't ready for. Ben pressed on the edge of the strap, a tiny click breaking the silence. The backplate slid open, revealing a second hidden compartment. Inside, a micro SD card. Jack hired me 2 years ago, Ben said quietly. If this watch ever hit a pawn shop, I'd know Ryan crossed the line. I swallowed hard, slid the card into my pocket, and braced myself. Later, at home. The first video opened, Ryan in a copy shop, leaning over a counter, pen scratching his name across a fraudulent power of attorney form. My stomach lurched. The date stamp was recent, too recent. Then came another file, a recording of Ryan and Brittany arguing, his voice sharp, impatient. She needs to be in a home now. We can't wait. Hers clipped and annoyed. Not before Maldives. I'm not canceling that trip." The bile rose in my throat. Every shred of pretense was gone. They weren't even masking their greed anymore. Ben's words echoed as I stared at the Rolex in my hand. Jack had known. He'd mapped this out. He'd left me not just a keepsake, but a weapon. My hands shook as I wound the crown, whispering to the empty room, "It's not just a watch anymore. Jack, it's our proof. Back home." I slipped the micro SD into my laptop. The directory bloomed open, folders of neatly labeled files, one in particular standing out, Nora's Protection. I clicked. Audio files rolled one after another, Ryan's voice slurred from drink, Brittany's sharp with calculation. "Once she's declared incompetent, we'll split the rentals. Sell fast before she figures it out." Another clip. "The house alone covers most of my debt. She won't even notice." Each file was a nail in the coffin of trust I'd once had in my son. Then came one more folder, titled simply, "Final." Inside was a video. Jack sat at his old desk, the lamplight soft across his face. His voice was steadier than I felt. "If you're hearing this, Nora, it means Ryan's playing his hand. He'll spread stories you're confused. He'll bring lawyers to force signatures. When that day comes, Nora, show them I taught you how to fight." I pressed my forehead to the screen, eyes burning. He had known every move before it happened. I sent the files to Asha that night. She called within the hour, her voice tight with awe. "Nora, this isn't just evidence. This is a trap Jack set, and Ryan already walked right into it." I sat at the kitchen table, Rolex clasped around my wrist, tears sliding unchecked. It wasn't just love Jack had left me. He'd built a fortress of paper, recordings, and foresight. He'd turned his last 2 years into a shield around me. Now it was my turn to finish the fight he had started. The courthouse smelled faintly of polish and rain, its old oak benches groaning beneath the weight of curious neighbors and distant relatives who had slipped in to watch. Cumberland County didn't see many guardianship hearings packed this full. Word had spread, a son dragging his own mother to court. I sat at the petitioner's table, palms damp against the polished wood. Across from me, Ryan straightened his tie with the same arrogance he'd worn since adolescence. Brittany perched beside him like she was attending a fashion show, lips painted a punishing red, eyes flicking over the crowd as if searching for allies. Their attorney, a tall man with an expensive suit and a colder expression, whispered last-minute strategy into Ryan's ear. "All rise," the bailiff called. The judge entered. A woman with gray hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun, her gaze sharp and unsparing. We all sat, the shuffle of papers filling the silence. Ryan's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client petitions for temporary guardianship of his mother, Eleanor Whitaker. She has shown signs of diminished capacity, forgetting appointments, leaving the stove on, mismanaging finances, for her safety, and to protect her assets. Guardianship is necessary." Brittany rose smoothly when prompted. "It breaks my heart to say this," she began, voice trembling with theatrical sorrow. "But Nora isn't herself anymore. She repeats conversations. She forgets names. Just last week she nearly burned down the kitchen, leaving a pan on the stove. We love her, but she needs oversight." A murmur rippled through the room. I clenched my fists, every word landing like acid. I forced myself to breathe, then stood, legs shaky but spine straight. "Your Honor," I said, my voice quivering at first, then hardening. "May I present my late husband's records?" The judge nodded. Asha Rao, seated beside me, rose gracefully, binder in hand. She began with the trust documents. Exhibit A, the Salt Wind Trust, established by Jack Whitaker, with assets clearly outlined. Mrs. Whitaker is the sole trustee. The financial planning is thorough, current, and leaves no doubt that she is capable of managing her own affairs. Ryan shifted in his seat, jaw tightening. Exhibit B, Asha continued. Testimony from Luis Alvarez, proprietor of Casco Bay Pawn and Timepieces. Luis stepped forward, his voice steady. Ryan Whitaker sold his father's Rolex to me for cash. When I asked why, his answers didn't sit right. He was impatient, dismissive, like the watch's value wasn't money, but something hidden. It was clear to me he was acting out of something other than honesty. The air thickened. Ryan's face flushed. Brittany tugged at her sleeve. I pulled the final card from my pocket, a flash drive from the Rolex. The bailiff plugged it into the court's monitor. The screen lit up with Ryan's image, leaning over a copy shop counter, signing a power of attorney document with my name at the top. Gasps broke out behind us. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Whitaker, would you like to explain this? Ryan's mouth opened, then closed. He looked to his lawyer, who was suddenly busy shuffling papers. Brittany turned her face away, color draining beneath her makeup. Exhibit D, Asha said quietly, sliding a disc across the table. An audio file recorded by Jack Whitaker before his passing. The judge nodded. The speakers crackled. Then Jack's voice filled the courtroom, steady, unflinching, almost alive. If they try to take everything, Nora, show them the truth. Silence. Not even the creak of benches. The weight of his words pressed down on every person in the room. The judge straightened, tapping her gavel once. Petition denied. Guardianship is not warranted. Furthermore, based on the evidence presented, this court refers the matter of Harbor and Hearth LLC to the District Attorney's Office for immediate investigation into potential fraud and forgery. The gavel came down again, sharp as a final verdict. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My hand went instinctively to the Rolex on my wrist, clutching it as though Jack's heartbeat still ticked within. For the first time in months, the fear that had gripped my chest loosened. Jack had promised to protect me. Even in death, he had kept his word. 2 mornings later, the street outside Ryan's house was a stage. Black SUVs lined the curb, their doors flung open as agents and Navy windbreakers fanned out with clipboards and evidence boxes. Neighbors gathered in clusters, arms folded against the chill, their whispers drifting down the block like smoke. I stood at the edge of my porch, watching as the front door was pried open. A voice with the authority of a hammer rang out. Financial Crimes Division. Harbor and Hearth LLC is frozen pending investigation. Within minutes, the evidence came spilling into daylight. Binders stamped with loan applications. Contracts marked with my forged signature. Credit card statements showing plane tickets to the Maldives. The resort deposit charged to the company account. Each piece paraded past the gawking neighbors, each one another nail in Ryan's coffin. The lead investigator held up a folder, his tone flat. Multiple fraudulent withdrawals, power of attorney documents bearing Mrs. Whitaker's name, notarized out of state. Classic elder exploitation. From the doorway, Brittany's composure cracked. The gloss of her lipstick couldn't hide the tremor in her voice. "I'll make a deal," she stammered, hands raised as if surrender could erase what she'd done. "I'll tell you everything Ryan planned, every detail, if it helps my sentence." Her words echoed down the street, a plea bargain delivered before the handcuffs even clicked. Ryan stumbled forward, face pale, sweat clinging to his collar. When the agents reached for him, he twisted, eyes wide and frantic. "Mom, please, don't let them do this. Say something. Tell them this isn't me." I met his gaze, my heart clenching and hardening all at once. My baby boy, reduced to a stranger. My voice came out steady, colder than I expected. "You did this to yourself. Ryan." The cuffs closed with a metallic snap, final and unforgiving. The crowd murmured as he was led past them, a fallen man in a neighborhood that had once admired his smile. I stood tall on my porch, pain burning beneath my ribs, but my head unbowed. The betrayal of a child is a wound without sutures, but justice, at least, had found its footing. Watching Ryan disappear into the back of the SUV, I felt the fracture of motherhood and the firmness of resolve in the same breath. Love had been twisted into greed, but truth had finally cut it free. The air off Casco Bay was sharper than I remembered, salted wind cutting across my cheeks as I stood at Portland Headlight once more. Months had passed since the courtroom, since the black SUVs, since the handcuffs that closed a chapter of my life I never thought I'd have to write. The lighthouse beam swept across the sea, steady, patient, eternal. Jack's Rolex, snug on my wrist, caught the light for a brief, golden second. It ticked against my skin with a rhythm so familiar I could almost hear his heartbeat in it. I opened the envelope marked Ethical Will and unfolded the single page inside. Jack's handwriting slanted with care. The ink faded slightly where his hand must have trembled. Money is a raft, not an anchor. Use it to carry others, not weigh yourself down. I read it 3 times, each word sinking deeper than the last. For months, I'd been carrying the weight of betrayal, the heaviness of courtroom battles, the jagged edges of a son who chose greed over blood. But Jack's words cut through the noise. Money wasn't meant to drag me into the dark. It was meant to lift others into the light. So I decided. The trust Jack had built would seed a program to teach coastal kids how to swim, free of charge, because too many families along this rocky shoreline had buried children after a summer slip. And more than that, I would create a mentorship fund for young men and women who dreamed of a life at sea, a program in Jack's name, the Whitaker Maritime Scholars. If Ryan had chosen exploitation, then Jack and I would answer with legacy. I closed the will, pressing it against my chest as the beam swung past again. Then came the knock. Light. Hesitant. I turned, and there she was. Melissa. Ryan's daughter from his first marriage. Her eyes, so much like his, were rimmed red, but there was something else in them too. A softness Ryan had long ago abandoned. She wrung her hands, her voice breaking. "Grandma, I'm sorry. I believed Dad and Brittany when they said you were confused. I should have known better. Can we start over?" I felt my throat close, the tide of pain and forgiveness colliding in one overwhelming surge. I reached for her, pulling her into my arms. She shook against me, a young woman caught between loyalty and truth, shame and love. "You were never lost to me, sweetheart?" I whispered into her hair. Not for a second. When she pulled back, there was a smile breaking through her tears, bright, raw, and real. And in that smile, in those eyes, I saw Jack, steady, faithful, alive in ways I hadn't realized until now. The Rolex ticked against my wrist, each second a reminder that time doesn't heal everything, but it does move us forward. Standing with Melissa beneath the sweeping beam of the lighthouse, I let the wind carry my words out to the water. I'm still moving. Jack. The light swung over us again, steady as ever, and for the first time since his heart gave out, I felt like mine was beating in time with his.